Yo, GDR here in beautiful Jamaica with a few answers to some of your questions. I hope they satisfy or provoke another question. The first one I'm going to tackle is one that's come in from a number of people about, and this is from the spiritual path, and talking about valid fears and valid desires and invalid fears and invalid desires. And the questions come in two kinds. One is, what do you mean by valid and why are you saying valid? And the second is rather than right or wrong or whatever. And the second question is, what is a valid fear? What is a valid desire? So firstly, why are you using the word valid? Okay, I use the word valid because for me, the spiritual is not concerned with right and wrong, good and evil. The world that we live in is definitely concerned with that. And they're very, very important to have at least some understanding, and even a collective understanding, if you can, about what constitutes a really evil thing and what constitutes good that people can do with and for each other. That's very helpful, in fact, required in this material world in which we live. But I think when you step into the spiritual arena, it no longer applies. For me, the spiritual is about what is required for connection and what is not required. And things like your vanity and your pride, well, they're required in this world. If you don't have a little degree of vanity, you can end up looking like a hobgoblin. If you don't have a measure of pride, the world is going to step on you in this world because it's very competitive. So you need a measure of both. If you have too much pride, that's a huge problem, and too much vanity, that's a huge problem. We can see that. But clearly you need a bit of both. But you don't need them when you go into that spiritual space. You can let your vanity stay at the door. You can let your pride stay at the door, among other things, like maybe your animosity or hostility or whatever, your resentment or whatever. Those things are not necessary. They're not required for connection, and in some ways they're impediments to connection. So that's the reason to use a word like valid, because for me, I don't see the spiritual as right, wrong, good, evil. That's this world and very important. But the spiritual is about what allows you to get connected, what impedes connection. In my life, heroin impeded connection. It broke the connection completely. Alcohol, when I drank to excess, in the days when I used to drink, when I drank to excess and so on, impeded connection. Other things I did and things I took from along the way sometimes enhanced the connection in one way or another, maybe for a brief period, but opened up a kind of connection. But for example, heroin and alcohol just broke the connection immediately. So that would make those invalid desires. I was filled with desire for both. So filled with the desire for heroin that I committed crimes, horrible crimes, about which and of which I'm still deeply ashamed. So, and that's not, oh my God, I beat myself up and so on. I think never lose sight of the fact that you did this. Just keep yourself anchored. Never think, oh, that's way in the past and now I'm cool. Just remember, you can be as cool as you like if you hang on to this and not let that go and keep yourself grounded. So heroin, which I desired greatly, was an invalid desire for me because it cut off my connection to other people, to my society, to my career, to the divine, to the spiritual. It just cut it. Alcohol to excess did exactly the same thing. I'm not saying a glass of wine is going to cut your connection to the divine. I'm not saying that. But when you drink, as I did from time to time to excess, getting drunk out of my mind for reasons that were not connected with that drink. They were in me, was why it wasn't the drink, oh my God, someone poured it down my throat. No, that was something in me that I had to get straight, so I didn't want that anymore. That's what I'm talking about when I say valid and invalid. Now let's talk about valid fears, valid desires, and have another look. A simple way, I think, to look at this is to say, a valid fear, and fear is a friend who warns you. Don't think fear is evil or wrong and fearless and so on. What is that? Don't tell me you're fearless. I've seen fearless people shaking in their boots. That's not it. They're a valid fear. Standing on a ledge on a 35-story building with nothing in front of you on a narrow ledge is going to fill you, unless you've done that millions of times, and then it might. That's going to fill you with valid fear. That's all this valid fear saying, whoa, this could annihilate you. Be very careful. That's valid fear. Valid fear enhances your viability. It enhances the viability of every animal in this planet. Every cat, every dog, everything that survives has valid fear that helped it to, say, give them a warning. So fear is the friend who warns you, and it's a valid fear. How is it valid? It enhances your viability. If your fear diminishes your viability as a person, even let's talk about an animal for a moment. If it is so afraid all the time that it can't eat properly, it can't rest properly, and it's constantly filled with anxiety and no one cares for that animal, it will go under. Its viability will be impaired. So that's invalid fear in a sense that it can be overcome. It's a fear that damaged the viability of the animal, too much fear. And that can happen in people where they have so much, they're so fearful that they become timid. And they have so many great ideas, so many things they want to say, but they can't because they're so timid and fear is holding them. It's diminishing their capacity to fulfill themselves, which is impairing their social and spiritual viability. So fears that help you to be viable in this world are valid fears. Fears that don't are invalid, and you can look at them and say, that's actually not connected with my viability as a person. I should address that. I'm going to get some help on this. I'm going to talk to somebody who's a therapist in this area. I'm going to talk to somebody who's a counselor in this area. I might go to my local life coach and get reference to this. I'm going to do this as part of my development myself because that fear is holding me back and impairing my viability. Now, desire is the same thing. If the things you desire, like as I said in my life, but also material objects, if you become absolutely obsessed with accumulating material objects, you'll find yourself, as many do, in a deep state of dissatisfaction. There's nothing left to buy. I own it all. I got a yacht, big one. I got a helicopter, I got a private jet. I got 60 mansions. I'm still not happy. Because those things were invalid desires. They were, I'm not saying each individual thing is an invalid desire, but the constant accumulation of these things becomes an invalid desire. It impairs your capacity to connect. It becomes a wall between you and connection, and ask any very, very rich person. Quite often that wall is organic and it's called bodyguards. You know what I mean? It's almost big and it's got wire on the top of it. As that wall, you can see the wall, but there's another wall, and that is the wall of reluctance to engage because I'm fearful. My desire has filled me with fear because that person might want my stuff. That person doesn't like me, they just like my money, if you know what I mean. And I've met very rich, well-meaning, well-intentioned people who've got themselves caught up in this and who've said to me, what am I going to do? And so on. The answer, by the way, is give it all away. And happy as Larry. I'd love to meet Larry, by the way. So, I have a Larry in my life. Larry Gohagan, brilliant editor from Steertown here in brilliant Ocharia. So, all right, big up Larry. So, valid fear, invalid fear enhances your viability and makes you stronger. Great. If that's fear that keeps you safe, you've got good reflexes and you've got good instincts, you go, whoa, something's not right. And then sure enough, there's a massive dog that goes past and it didn't even see you because your valid fear held you back, if you know what I mean. Invalid fear, I can't go anywhere near there because there might be a dog there. Oh, I can't do this because people might not like me and I don't know. And so let people like you for who you are. Don't be afraid. And that's not a valid fear. All right. So I hope that answers that question for you readers on this notion of valid and invalid fear, valid and invalid desire. This Jamaica is filled with valid desire and there is no fear among the people. I love the people. Of course, people have the normal valid fear, and of course there are things that happen that should make anyone fearful, as that happens in every country in the world. But what I see when I'm here in Jamaica is people who are filled with faith in themselves. Every single individual filled with faith in themselves, filled with faith in their country, in Jamaica, in its beauty, in its capacity to sustain you. Everyone in Jamaica knows you can go into the hills and survive. It's so rich in fruits and foods and fish and everything else you could want in this country. Why? Because the Jamaican people kept it that way. Big up Jamaica. One love. GDR out.